Is that not allowed to be on video?
It's
Swallow
your
it. Swallow it.
professionalism that's getting called out here. So you tell me.
Not mine. Not me. Not me. What is up, guys? We're back. Mike Frank, Heather Kelley today on
Hello.
episode number 117. I think it's like 104. 103. I was so close. Of two Baltimorons. We're here talking a little bit today about the truth about housing shortage, and we've got a great Instaworld reel today on the housing shortage. So let's watch this, and we're going to react.
There is a housing shortage. How does that affect the real estate market over the next 5 years?
Supply and demand. The supply is low, the demand is high. So that's why rents go up so
So why is there a housing shortage though?
Man, there's been so much politicization of housing and real estate, and it's difficult to build. Like you look at some of the markets where it's most pronounced, New York, California. There's this thing called NIMBY. You ever heard of NIMBY? Not in my backyard. People say, yeah, we need affordable housing, but don't build it on my street, right? And so what that does is it disturbs the real estate market for that particular city. And we just by and large have not built enough moderate and middle income or affordable housing. So, you know, millionaires don't have any problem. They could buy whatever they want to buy. I don't like this dude. Right? Or live wherever they want to live. We're talking about the rank and file public, workers, you know, teachers, ambulance drivers, you know,
Sanitation workers, the rank and file public who have good jobs, they work hard, but there's been such an escalation in the cost of rents because of the supply and demand disruption that these rents are off the table. I mean, if 4 million units of housing hit the market tomorrow, all rents would drop, but it takes years and years to build it. That's why, you know, we have this condition because it's hard to just increase the supply quickly. You have to have an alignment of politics, of market forces like real estate, interest rates. You know, interest rates are out of control right now, so it makes it very hard to build. Sometimes you have construction costs going off the rails. Like everyone heard about historically what was going on with supply chain disruptions, you know, last year. So you have all these things that can throw that equation off and make it hard to produce housing. So, you know, right now it's come to a critical point, and you know, particularly elected officials have to get off of the rubric where they want to, you know, almost politicize housing, make all real estate developers evil, all real estate is bad. We have a lot of that narrative coming out of certain communities and certain cities, but it doesn't help to do anything because people still cannot find good housing, and the only way to get it is to build it, right? We have to upzone.
I'm curious. My biggest question here is, what does middle class housing being built look like? Would you not argue that you know what I'm saying? Like,
Damn.
I feel like that
right there is deep. Like, I don't even think that way.
In my head, that's what that is.
Well, in my head, I wasn't even thinking like, oh, middle class housing. Like in my head, it's just housing, right? Like we have a shortfall of, there's no other way to say it other than like project housing and support housing and, you know, increased the ability to provide assistance for those people that are in need and even the lower class. So like for this guy to come along and say, oh, it's a middle class problem. Well, I mean, you think high class people don't have the same challenge? And they're going to be like, oh no, because again, he talked about making real estate into the big bad, you know, person, the real estate developer into the big bad wolf. Like it's the same thing here. We're just talking about middle class because it's the sexy thing. That's how I feel. I think that's like the most truest thing. I think the challenge that we have, he did touch on it, is like it's impossible to increase supply at the rate at which we need it.
Yeah.
It's almost like we need a culture change, right? We need people to be more okay with co-living and incumbent living, like having other
And I think-
family members with you or other,
Yeah.
how do you say this without saying like brothel, right? But like maybe 2 or 3 or 4 families living in a quote unquote compound. That's not something that we do here in America.
Correct. But I think this is where multi-generational living is having such a come up right now. I think this is one of the reasons why.
I mean, multi-generational living is having a come up because of the need plus the cost.
Yeah.
It's insurmountable to think about buying a $475,000-$625,000 house for a family member that may be aging out of their home, whether it's the maintenance or the capacity to walk the steps or whatever it might be.
I was just about to say the practicality of it.
Yeah, the practicality. Like, you can't think that that person's just going to drop $500,000 when their first home was, $62,000.
Not $500,000 on top of rates that are
Right.
way higher than they've been seeing over the course of their life.
So when we talk about the housing crisis, right, or I'm going to call it a supply crisis. It's not a housing crisis. The supply crisis. We're creating an opportunity where he even said, like, what was the acronym? NIMBY? Not in my backyard. Yeah. NIMBY, right? Not in my, yeah. That's like shocking because I've never heard that before, but I certainly understand it. Mm-hmm. And I can see a lot of people saying, oh my God, we need to create affordable housing, but not near me. And the way I look at it is we need to create more opportunity. I'm not defraying the idea that there's no supply shortage, but I think there aren't enough people that understand the opportunities that are presented to them. I was at an open house yesterday and a young couple came in. I'm sure that they're, well off and successful and good credit and all the other things. And they were asking me about grant programs. And absolutely. Let me educate you. How can I educate you? What more can I tell you? Oh, well, our agent didn't know. Well, where did you get your agent? Oh, well, our agent worked with my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, right? Like, so this agent that you're just sort of like inherently trusting because of their track record of success doesn't actually have the knowledge to provide the support. Now, if that's these folks, and I certainly hope that they don't require these kind of programs to buy a home, how many folks are getting the disservice of not knowing how to buy a home?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
For
the
sure.
supply shortage is one problem, and I'm not taking that away from anything, but the capacity to purchase is the bigger problem.
That's what I was going to say, especially with what we reviewed this morning, what we're seeing on obviously a countrywide landscape, but also worldwide. Affordability is at an all-time high. So we can talk as much as we want.
Why is that term high? Affordability is high, right? Like, it's challenging.
Yeah.
But it should be like low. It should be affordability is low.
Trash.
But that's, but we always say that. Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah. But essentially, well, obviously inherently buying a home is going to be a challenge if you have limited income coming in with the rate and the acceleration of,
I mean, just the market.
my brain just completely
Right,
blanked
like-
on English.
But no, I mean, you're right with the interest rates that they are today. And by the way, like, I'm a little bit exhausted, surprise, to hear people talking about how the rates are like, oh, they're crazy high. First of all, they're not crazy high,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Your grandfather bought his house by trading in his car, and it was like $15,000. So
your grandfather's grandfather bought his car by giving away 2 horses and a goat, right?
and his third child, literally.
But like, many of our parents, the generation before us, and I think that's a pretty safe thing to say, bought houses at a rate that might be 10% higher than it were today. For example, for any of you guys that graduated high school anytime between 2005 and 2020, your parents probably got an interest rate in the teens and maybe in the high teens. I think my parents had a 19% interest rate on their first house. In the 80s, they were in the 20s and 23s and 26s. So we're sitting here at 6.5%. Oh, they're so high. They're incomprehensible. It's like, well, hey, the more people buy and the more people spend, the more we're controlling the inflation. We're not just creating interest rates just to be difficult, right? The Fed is setting interest rates that follow with inflation and jobs reports and, how our budget and bankroll is rolling. You know, like if we're going more into debt, we need to make more opportunity for ourselves, but inflation can't go out of control. So it's like this delicate balance, and where we are as real estate agents, I think the value is education for both buyers and sellers. Because I see a huge shortfall of sellers that might have bought their home in the last 6 or 10 years where they have a 2.5% interest rate and they're like, I'm not moving. And it's like, guys, let me show you 7 reasons why you should move, right? Let's think about this. You're growing your equity. You've got a low interest rate. That's great. But also, what if you were to take on another mortgage payment for more money, more equity, more build in the long run? Yeah, your mortgage payment's going to be a little bit higher, but ultimately you're creating an opportunity for another family to come in here and do the same thing for themselves. Maybe that's not compelling enough for some people, but the idea of keeping the property for a rental property is also a challenge where, yeah, who wouldn't want to do that right now? And that's a challenge for buyers because home sellers are saying, well, I'd like to sell my house, but also I have a $300,000 mortgage at 2.5% interest. I'm paying $1,500. But my house is also worth $475 and I can get $2,300 a month for my rent. Like, why would I not do that? Mm-hmm. So
that's fair. Do you have any insight as to what the ratio would be of the 20% interest rates on the low numbers of what it was to purchase a home versus what they are now? You see what I'm saying?
Idea.
Like, I know that's a weird way of asking that, but like do
I'll
you think percentage wise it would be somewhere around the same?
It's probably not like related by percentage, but I would wonder what the interest profitability would be for the investor, not the buyer, but the investor that invested in the $128,000 house back in 1996 or 1992, what that investor earned by comparison to an investor today investing in a $375,000 house at 6%, right? Like, I wonder what that investor would stand to profit. Something that was interesting in an article I read yesterday talked about, let me think about this. It talked about 10% of retirees over the age of 65 or 60, I think, owned real estate as a source of income and revenue versus 7% own real estate as an income and source of revenue under 55. So it was like 5 or 10 years difference, the amount of people that were owning real estate as an investable source. And I feel like that's such a good way to make money. It's such a good retirement income. It's a savings plan. It's a principal payoff. It's an equity build. There's a lot of opportunity by owning real estate, but owning real estate doesn't help solve the housing shortage, right? If anything, I think owning real estate proliferates the housing shortage because what I see happening, we've talked about this ad nauseum, where people are so focused on buying the coffee for $6 a day or having the handbag that they prefer that they'll spend a couple dollars more to have a nicer townhouse than they could afford if they went to go buy one, right? Because affordability is at an all-time high, low. I'm not really sure what that really means, but it's very, very complicated to buy a house when you're looking at the rent versus purchase price, when you're looking at the costs of carrying a mortgage and the costs of maintenance and repairs by comparison to living in this comfy rental where I have luxurious, valet trash, I think that is a greater issue that serves our community, is changing the mentality around buying a house. The other thing, we talked a little bit about it in our blog. If you guys don't know, we have a blog on our website at frankoliverco.com. Under additional resources, you can go to the blog. Liv puts up the blog every Monday, and it talks a little bit about ways to ease the housing shortage. And one of the things it talks about is like increasing construction, investing into infrastructure, and the financial support from a governmental level, right? We're not going to create housing supply by encouraging people to sell their home. We're not going to create housing supply by, I guess more incentivizing is the word. I don't know. Incentivizing people financially. But what we are going to be able to do is we're going to be able to make infrastructure and developmental changes that are going to be able to allow us to build, in that Instagram reel, he talked about like, oh, you can't just put 400 million houses into the economy. It won't work. Well, there's however many millions of houses that are in foreclosure right now. And the government learned from 2008 that if you release all of these foreclosures out into the world, it just floods the inventory with negative equity. And so what ends up happening is it crashes the positive equity build. And that was one of the changes that happened in 2013. You can't just flood the market with inventory. What we have to do is we have to start making infrastructure improvements and allowing ourselves to develop land that maybe previously otherwise hadn't been considered, right? How many of these office buildings are undergoing renovations for apartment leasing? Yeah. How many of these warehouses are undergoing renovations to become apartments, right? What if we were incentivizing an infrastructure build to make that transition into a more of a equity build, like a condo or like a mixed use development or like maybe it's time that we create the newest version of an HOA condo, right? Because condos here in Maryland don't have the same equity growth due to the condo fees and the maintenance costs and the, rates and other factors that play into it. Maybe we need to start looking into that.
Condo fees are a scam.
It's not a scam.
It's not a scam, and I know that, but I see a cute little condo, and then it's got a $2,152 condo fee every month, and it makes me want to poop my pants. What the fuck do you mean?
You're going to need a jacket and a cape.
Yo, literally.
Anyway, the challenge is that you have a condo complex that has 120 units in it. How many of them are delinquent? How many of them are not paying their condo fees, right? So not only when the condo fees were expected to be paid, were they expected to be paid to freight across to everyone, but the carpets have to be cleaned, the front walk has to be shoveled, the concierge has to sit there, they have to accept deliveries, maintenance, everything. And you can't just not pay those costs. So what ends up happening is if you have 20 unit owners and one is delinquent in their payments, well, now you have to rise condo ownership
by 5%.
By 5% because the other 19 people have to make up for it, but then it becomes insurmountable and someone can't make the payments, and then all of a sudden now you have 2 people that are delinquent, and then you raise the payments again, and then you're starting to impact the equity because that's the way that condo ownership works. And I don't know that there's a way around that, but I think that allowing developers and builders to build more apartments is solving a physical housing struggle, but it's not.
Would you say that that's a short term? Yeah.
Yeah. Like, we're not building anything by creating developments that are apartment complexes. We're helping people become wealthy, but we're not creating anything for the person that's renting the apartment.
Yeah.
Right. I have a client that was looking for a very short period of time. They got a job, they had to make a transition, they had a very, very quick move, and they ultimately decided to sign a 6-month lease. Well, his goal is to buy a house after 6 months, and that's really, really smart. Well, so many tenants will sign a 1-year lease, we'll see what happens, I don't know what's going to go on. Now the number one thing I hear, even from my brothers, is like, oh, now it's not time to buy. I'm like, why? Oh, we don't know if we're going to be in this school, professors, right? We don't know if we're going to be in this school for the next 5 years. We might move. Okay, so you're just going to rent for another year. Well, what happens when you're here for 2 years? And what happens when it's 3 years? And then when it's 4 years? You just wasted all that money.
Yeah. Because
you aren't willing to take the next step. That's almost like a culture problem that we've created. So I fear that the culture problem is leading the development challenge.
That's fair.
And the development challenge is ultimately leading to not a housing shortfall, but like a home ownership shortfall. Mm-hmm. All right, so kind of scrolling down on our blog here and looking at my phone because my computer's off for some reason. But anyway, so some tips for buyers and sellers on the. I'm going to take the seller side. You could take the buyer side. On the buyer side, how could you make a recommendation? I know that this says, like, be prepared, expand your search. Like, come on. But what would you suggest to a buyer? One long-winded suggestion, how to navigate the market currently.
Let's be flexible.
Damn.
Let's just be flexible.
That's awesome.
That's it.
That's awesome. What do you mean by that?
When it comes to, I have a lot of people looking in, let's just call it under 300,000 price point.
Okay.
and saying, I want an open floor plan, hardwood floors. I want a single family detached with an updated kitchen. I need a kitchen island, minimum 3 bedrooms, 2 bathroom. I need a finished basement, and I need exterior access from the basement with a fenced in backyard. Okay. So that part.
Right.
But
so the challenge being that they're just not realistic.
So I would say areas, the level of updatedness and things of that nature. If we can work with anything, I know that school districts are not something that a lot of people want to navigate. If you have your heart set on a school district, the odds of you wanting to change that are relatively low. Very understandable. I understand you have standards for where you want to live. All of these things I get. But if we can be flexible, understanding that the market isn't necessarily in our favor, especially as we're buyers at the moment, it's going to go a long way.
That is like the most political thing I've ever heard. I mean, to say be flexible to a buyer right now would be the most ambiguous statement, but it's so encompassing, to be honest. That's awesome. If I was going to do the same thing for sellers, I would... So here we talk about pricing strategy and marketing effectively, and of course be flexible. That was actually on the seller side. Hey, who knew?
I didn't even get there.
But my recommendation would be listing your home is a psychological challenge more than it is a physical one. And what I mean is when we're dealing with buyers that are going through this flexibility and this change, if you price your home, let's say that right house is $350,000 or $725,000 or $950,000, right? It doesn't matter what the price is. The market may tell you that this is the right price, but the market will quickly tell you that buyers don't perceive it to be of value. And what I mean by that is, hey, this buyer loves the house. They're pre-approved up to $350,000. They really want it, but they won't even submit an offer because the market has shown them that if they don't offer over list price, that they don't buy. And so when they've made 7 offers, $285,000 on a $260,000 listing, or $315,000 on a house listed for $295,000, now they see the house that they really, really want, but it's $315,000, and what they do is they psychologically psych themselves out. They're not even going to submit. I'm not going to build myself up to get let down.
Yeah.
And so by being a psychological seller, we're realizing that it's not just about what's written on the paper, but also maybe we take the approach of let's list this property for $500 so that it sells for $535 instead of listing it for $530 and have 15 buyers walk away from it because they don't want to pay $550.
And I think the other side to that seller conversation is making sure everyone is on the same page about buyer perceived value versus appraisal value, because the two are not the same.
Yeah. All right, so what key factors contributing to the current market, what key factors are contributing to the current housing market, and how has demand for homes changed in recent years?
Okay, my answer to the first question is supply and demand. I think that's pretty elementary.
Yikes.
Demand changing. There's definitely an increased demand.
Okay, so in your head, you're just thinking it's the increased demand. I would challenge and say it's not just increased demand. It's not this little game of people want Pokemon more than they used to. It's a basic necessity. And we treat it like it's just a commodity. It's not. It's a basic necessity to have a home that you could put a roof over your head. And when we talk about housing shortfall, we're not talking about demand. We're talking about just a quantity of freaking people. And people will say urban sprawl, and people will say community expansion and development and all these other fancy terms. But what if we just think about if we have a concentration of people at the center of a city and they have 2 children, well, now there's 4 people. And if they have 2 children, now there's 4, 8. Now there's, 4, 6, 10, and now it's 10 people, right? So 2 went to 4, 4 went to 10 because they got a sibling or they got a partner, and then they had 2 children. All of a sudden, it's the exponential growth of just population density. Why are we sitting here talking about all these other fancy terms? Why don't we just realize that there's a a population density challenge that we're up against, and housing shortfall is just a fancy term for like where these people are going to live. And to me, I feel that is the biggest indicator of our changing market.
Yeah.
Especially where we were in 2017, 2018, 2019, and then we hit 2020, and now there's an entirely new quote unquote demographic in our community too.
Yeah.
So, all right. So how's the housing shortage impacting real estate investors and the opportunities that are emerging for them?
Having to pay more to get the same house.
I would even extend that to say having a lesser profitability, like upside, right? You have to be willing to take a loss for the first year or the first 3 years in order to have a long-term success. If you truly believe in what you're doing, you're going to buy a property for $385 or $450 or $700. And yeah, you might lose cash flow for the next 48 months. But if you genuinely believe in it, you're going to end up with positive cash flow for 26 years thereafter, right? I feel we got so accustomed to, if I rent this property for this much money and what markets are the most lucrative. I don't know that any market truly is incredibly lucrative as a community. Not anything around here. I think what we're seeing the most of our clients do is either getting into the capital builds, which are flipping properties, developing properties, and otherwise, where they're generating large amounts of capital in an instant, or they're buying in good equity build communities where they're buying a property where perhaps they're spending $300,000 and their monthly payment might be $2,100. Well, the rent roll in that community might only be $2,300 or $2,400. They're basically paying their expenses. Because the equity build long term, that house will be worth $400,000 before we know it. That house will rent for $2,900 before we know it. And so they're doing I'm buying into a solid community with good development because my equity build is going to be strong. That's my perspective on it.
I can see that.
Do you have a first-time home buyer that's dealing with this market right now? What they're going through, what they're frustrated with, what their challenges have been, like how they've overcome, or maybe just fallen apart. Dun, dun,
We got time?
We got time.
Do we have a specific client we want to review?
I mean, we don't want to say anybody's name.
I have one client. Yeah, it's probably the same one that you're thinking of right now. I have a client under contract.
Oh, I was not.
And we were, who are you talking? Are you talking about the one that
Mine
you
is
showed?
Mine is personal.
Oh, I thought it was a SJ moment.
Nope.
But I have a client that's under contract right now, and we've been going back and forth with numerous lenders. We've gotten her connected with Ryan Curley at First Home. Shout out to Ryan. And he had essentially told us that our financial position was one that we couldn't move forward with. However, we had a pre-approval. All of her numbers had been ran through by the lender, and he said that we were good to go. So long story short, we're still pushing through, but the cash to close, credit, things of this nature, and the relationship between her credit going down drastically because she had different lenders pull and it went down a little bit naturally, and she's ending up paying, I'd say probably 30% of the closing costs that she now has to pay are just because her credit has declined.
Added expenses, yeah. I think the perseverance is something that kind of stands true for all of our clients. Yeah. Even, I'm going to use my brother as an example. It was a long time ago, but it's still a similar market. And what my brother did was he said, I don't care what house I buy, I just need a freaking house. And that was literally what he said to me. I don't care what house I buy, I just need a freaking house. So he didn't even see the house that he was going to purchase until he bought it. And then it was the perspective that he carried once he owned this house. It was like, all right, well, the oven sucks, but maybe I'll buy a new oven. And then that brought good life to the world where, you know, it was a housewarming gift for him to buy a new oven, or where he saw the opportunity to steam clean the carpets rather than replace them, because while they weren't the best, it was a carpet. It was a house that he owned. And now the life that he's built and the opportunity that he's created, he's so optimistic because of the neighbors that are selling for $100,000 more than him because of when he bought his house. It wasn't so much like the perfect one or that detached house that you talked about.
It comes back to the flexibility of it.
Yeah, and he was more fed up than flexible, but whatever it takes to get there. I just think that experience, that psychological aspect that he brought to the table was unique for me.
Yeah, I think it's really the difference of viewing your home that you're buying as an investment as opposed to the way that people view their rentals.
That
and
literally
I think,
wasn't supposed to happen.
I'm dead.
But
I mean, that's just not the viewpoint that you have of it when you're renting. So it makes sense to rent a place that's $250 more because you have the valet trash, you have the nice upgraded appliances and stuff like that. But it's just a different mental standpoint.
Yeah. I think as we look forward, the solutions that may be presented might be more of that like buyer education, that consumer education. I can't rely on that enough. We started doing first-time home sellers events, and we had 3 or 4 families come out to our last one. I think it's a fantastic event because it really allows people to come to a safe space and learn about something they've never done before. Especially with your largest investment of your life, you need people to talk to that you feel like you can trust. Emphasis that you feel like you can trust, right?
Yeah.
You need to know that it's right inside. And these people are there to guide you through the process. I'm worried that there are way too many people that just throw their hand and they go, I have a 2.5% interest rate, I'm not moving. Or they go like, well, we're not going anywhere, we can't afford in this new market. Or even like that Instagram reel where he talked about, oh, the interest rates are crazy high. What if we changed our rhetoric? What if we changed our terminology? What if we started saying interest rates are aggressive, but I'm not willing to let that prevent me from achieving my goals? I think that home seller education would be a real solution for our community. I think the challenge is that doing that at a very, very large scale. We talked about dumping 400 million new houses into the community. We're not going to change 40 new houses in the community by changing home seller education. But I think that's the biggest key. I think educating our consumers and helping them understand how to make the transition. I have a wonderful client that bought a house with me a couple years ago. He called me yesterday and said, hey, I found my new home. I need to sell my house. Will you come over and talk to us through the process? Absolutely. Are you free tonight at 6:30? And so I'm going over there to talk to him and his fiance through the process of what does it look like to sell this home? Because he's worried. It's a lot. It's a big investment. He's invested capital into the home since he's owned it. And of course, no one wants to lose money, but more so than anything, he doesn't want to lose this next house that he wants to buy. And so having the education, I think, is the only way that we're going to overcome this quote unquote housing shortfall, right?
I'd agree.
I'm still calling it a home ownership shortfall. Anyway, all right, well, skipping right to the end. We've got a lot of things going on here in Maryland. This month is my favorite, except it's so freaking hot right now. Anybody that was out and about last weekend, kudos to you. We had a bunch of open houses, very well attended by very serious buyers. So there's a suggestion for you home sellers out there. Serious buyers come along when the market is the worst, right? When the weather is the worst, when it's the wrong time of the year, when it's Christmas season or otherwise, real buyers come along because they really want to make this transition happen. If you are interested, a couple years ago, I went to the Maryland Mac and Cheese Festival. It was an adventure. It is the weekend. It's this weekend, the 29th and the 30th.
That's great.
And then we, of course, have our home buyer event, home buyer brunch on July 20th, and the investor seminar at the end of every month is this Wednesday, June 26th, here at our office at 3858 Falls Road. Thanks to Heather putting our sign back up this morning. Blushing.
I tried to straighten her out and she fell right the fuck off. It was not my fault and I accept no responsibility. None.
And it's back up and it looks great now.
No hurt,
but
no foul.
You guys know where to reach me on Instagram at michael.frank__ or on our website at frankoliverco.com. You can reach out anytime and get more information on tips on being a great seller and investing in the market. And Heather?
I'm Heather Kelley. You can reach me at 443-281-9500.
I love it. Talk to you guys real soon. What's up, guys? Thanks for watching. For more information on the housing market, Real Estate 101, how you can leverage your position in today's market, and so much more, click on the link below. If you like this video or have a burning real estate question you'd like us to answer, leave us a comment and let us know. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode, and we'll see you again real soon.